Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah Perek Vav Halacha Vav. A kli, a vessel, Hashem Kosav Olov, had a name written on it. Kreated is Mokem Hashem V'Goinzoi. You just have to cut out the portion a section which has the name of Hashem, and you put it away. Let's go down to the Peirush. Hashem Chokuk B'Kli Mateches, even if it was scratched into the metal vessel, B'Kli Schuchias, with a glass vessel, V'Hitech and he melted it. He would receive malchus, because you're not allowed to do this to the Hashem Elokeichem. Elohoitech es mekoimoy, you have to take off that portion that's there, you cut it off. V'goinzoin, you have to begoinez it, which means bury it. We find this in Erchen, the Prichodesh, first in the Rambam, even if the Shem was in the vessel, it needs to be placed in Geniza, in the burial archive. Even though many times the idea of inscription is not considered writing, but since regarding the forbiddenness of erasing the Shem Hashem, it doesn't say writing. It says, do not do so to Hashem Elokeichem. Therefore, even if the name is written or inscribed, it would be included in do not do so to Hashem your God. Now, regarding Malchus, on erasing the name of Hashem, the Pri Chodesh writes that some of the Chacham aren't sure if Malchus is Min Torah, only if he wrote it, and he wrote it as a Shem Kodesh, or even if he didn't write it as Shem Kodesh, it's written, you get Malchus if you erase it. And it would seem from the words of the Rambam that if you melt a vessel that has the name, you get Malchus. That it would seem that a name that's not written without Kedusha, you're also forbidden to erase it Min Torah. Because usually if you write on a vessel, you didn't write it for a sanctity. But the Birkei Yosef writes, pushes this off, could be that it's talking about a Shem which is written B'Kedusha. Taz writes that if the Shem was written in Sefer Torah not in the correct place, so then you have to bury it. It's no worse than on the handle of a vessel. That would seem that he too understands that what's written on the handle of a vessel is talking about that it was written with sanctity, just like in the Sefer Torah. But Agos Maimonides in the beginning of the Perek wrote in the name of the Ureim, if you wrote a name without intent to sanctify it, it does not have the sanctity of the holy name. It would seem that there's no forbiddenness to erase it. That would be the opinion also of the Amud Goylo, the Smak. The Birkei Yosef cites these two opinions, whether it's permitted to erase it when it was written without sanctity. There are those who say yes, there are those who say no. According to Pri Chodesh, it's forbidden, and according to the Agos Maimonides and Yereim, it's permitted. According to the Amud Goylo in the Machon Ephraim, there's no disagreement between these opinions. Those that say it's permitted is when he didn't have intent to write it to begin with. He wanted to write Yehuda, and he ended up forgetting to put the Dalet in, and it came out the Shem Hashem. But there's no sanctity to the name Hashem, and they could erase it. What the Pri Chodesh is forbidden is because the person knew that he writes the Shem Hashem, but he didn't intend to make it holy. There's a forbiddenness of erasure. But if he didn't have intent to write the Shem, only it just came out that way, here he'll admit to the Pri Chodesh that there's no forbiddenness to erase it. And it could be that we will not have any problem at all from what a name that's written on vessels. You can't erase it because he wanted to write the Shem even though he didn't intend to sanctify it. And that's a third possibility. In other words, either to write it without sanctity, to write it, no, you're not with sanctity, or to inadvertently write it, or to write it rather, and intend specifically not to have sanctity, not by accident. Your questions if it's permitted to use a ring that has on it the Shem Hashem and to wear it on the finger. It's forbidden. And he concludes that even though you're allowed to use it, even though the name of Hashem is on it, but it's not correct to wear it because it could come very easily to be denigrated, like the Rambam says. So it would seem from the Rambam here that even a Hashem that's written on a vessel, there's a forbiddenness to erase it because it has a sanctity to it. The Chavazir writes further, when a goy writes Hashem on a wall, so we have to say that he did it because of the Jewish faith, and even if he wrote it without any intent, it has a sanctity. That the letters of the Shem have a kedusha, even if he didn't intend to cause them to be holy. And there's a forbiddenness to erase them. You get malchus minat Torah. Look at the Shals of Chuvas Pano Meiris. The Gemara in Erchin 6:1 and B writes that Hashem that's not in its place is not that holy. And Rashi explains that only the place of Hashem is holy, but not the entire section. And Rashi also explains on the walls or vessels that it doesn't become holy because the place of writing the Shem is only on paper or on parchment when you write a posik with the Shem. But without it, it's not Kodesh. This differentiation between these two explanations, the Peirush explains in the both in Rashi that according to the first explanation, there's no difference if the Shem is written on paper or parchment or on a vessel. And the place where it's written, it becomes holy, and the rest, or the vessel, does not become holy. But according to the second explanation, the only thing that becomes holy is the place where the name is written. And he has to write a posik with the name, and then everything will become holy. The reason you have to scratch off and put away, according to the second opinion, even that part which was not sanctified, is because Midrabanan became holy. Rambam explains, like the first explanation of Rashi, and therefore that if he says if you erase the name that's written on vessels, he gets malchus, which is different from the rest of the vessel, that you can use it because it has no kedusha, only the place where the name of God is found. Shlomo Eiger writes that if you cut up the Shem, you have to cut up all the portion that's written on the Shem Hashem at one point, and he shouldn't cut off each letter separately, because then he's separating the portions, and that's called mechika. So too, if the name of Hashem was written on his physical body, he's not allowed to take a bath or smear himself with oil because they'll erase the name. Because he can't stand in a place which is where one is not allowed to mention holy things because of the filth. If he has to go to the mikveh for a carry or other things, of gumi, he places on it something for toivel, and he goes to the mikveh. The Gemara is the Shabbos 120b. So how does he do it? If he does it too much, the water won't get there. And therefore he doesn't go to the mikveh. If he doesn't do it hard, then it'll erase it again. So the Kesef Mishnah explains that the Gemara questions, how were we not fearful from that is a separation from the fact that it's written on his body, and the writing and the ink itself are chatzitza. And therefore he answered the Gemara that's talking about where it's still soft, it's still, what do you call it, not dried, there's no chatzitza. The Gemara says that the putting on the gumi is not so that the name should not be erased, but rather because you can't stand before the Shem Hashem Olam. The reason that Rambam doesn't mention this idea at all of being that the ink is still not dry, because the Mishnah says because that is from the Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. that he brings down in the halachas of mikvahs, going to immersing in a mikveh, and here we're dealing with erasing in the shame. In our text we have this words. If he didn't find gumi, he covers it with his garments. Another psukim we find Misaviv Acharov, and that's found in Orchos Chaim. It means if he has no gumi, he has to go and try find gumi in order to be able to go to the mikveh. Well, he had a kadesh liyochotz, and he can't do it too strongly against the body. He shouldn't separate. And the Rambam says the only reason they said to place the gumi on the shame was not to stand in front of the shame when he is not dressed. The Gemara, there's a question if you have to put on it all a gumi, or he should go down and just go to the mikveh normally. The Gemara says that it's also the machlokes is if tefillah b'zman is a mitzvah. The Tanna Kamma is of the opinion that it's not a mitzvah. Obviously, the opinion it's a mitzvah. The Rambam passing like the Tanna Kamma would seem is the opinion that tefillah b'zman is not a mitzvah. So the Halacha Mishnah has a question in another place in Perek Gimel of Shvisas also in Yom Kippur. Rambam writes that those who have to go to the mikveh can do so on Yom Kippur, but not on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. That would seem to infer that he's of the opinion that immersing at the time you have to immerse is a mitzvah, and therefore you're allowed to do it. Furthermore, the Halacha Mishnah questions of the Gemara. There's a disagreement between the Tanoim, the Kohen who burns the Parah Aduma, it becomes Tamei, or Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur. Both of them you separate for 7 days. Amei is of the opinion that you spray on them from Echatos all 7 days. Obviously, the opinion that you don't do it all 7 days, but only on the 3rd and the 7th day. Haninas Kahanim differentiates. And the one who does it for the Parah Aduma, you do it all 7. The Kohen Gadol, for Yom Kippur, you do it only on the 3rd and the 7th. The Gemara says everyone's of the opinion that tefillah b'zman is a mitzvah. They only disagree if the spraying is like tefillah or not. The Rambam codifies the halacha of Hanino that you do it on the 3rd, 3rd, and the 7th day, and thus we see that the Rambam is of the opinion that tefillah in its time is a mitzvah. Now this question is dealt with in Perek Aleph Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, Halacha Dalet, in the first volume that we gave out. But we have to explain how the Rambam seems to contradict himself. Here he says that tefillah b'zman is not an obligation, and how does he say there that it is not a mitzvah? It is a mitzvah. The Mishnah explained that the Rambam is of the opinion that tefillah b'zman is not a mitzvah. The Gemara that says that everybody agrees that tefillah b'zman is a mitzvah is only intending regard to the disagreement of Meir Rabbi Yossi. Haninas Kahanim, the Rambam quotes his opinion with him, is the opinion that tefillah b'zman is not a mitzvah. Kabbos Timon disagrees on the Halacha Mishnah, and he states that the opinion of the Rambam is it is a mitzvah. Why does the Tanna Kamma here say that you can place a gumi? Meaning, if he had found it easily so. If he didn't find it, he put his garments on it like Rabbi Yossi. According to the Chachamim, he would not go to the mikveh until he found the gumi and places it on his shame. According to the Kabbos Timon, they are correct only if we have the text of the Rambam that there's no gumi, then he has to cover it with his garments. But according to our text, he has to seek out the gumi. We have to learn that the Rambam is of the opinion, like the Chachamim. It's that I'm passing like the Chachamim. Tefillah b'zman is not a mitzvah. That's why you can't be toivel without covering it. Somebody who did go immerse himself with the writing of the shame on his body, the Mishnah writes that does not transgress on erasure of the Shem Hashem, since he only causes it to happen. It's causative. It's not. He doesn't do it actually. The Ravaz and Shuvas in his Chuvas wrote that he also say that there's a forbiddenness even when he does it through immersion. Just that the mitzvahs, the positive mitzvah of tefillah pushes off the negative commandment of erasing Hashem's name. The Ridvaz pushes off these words. He writes, "There's no mitzvah to go to the mikveh. If one wants to, he can leave it, be tomei, but he shouldn't go into the Beis Hamikdash." The Rambam says tefillah is a mitzvah asay. He counts it as a mitzvah asay, but it's only a mitzvah. It's only like a mitzvah shlit. That even that is among the mitzvahs, but it's not a mitzvah that chiyuv is an obligatory one, like putting on tefillin. There's no mitzvah to slaughter an animal, but if you want to eat meat, you have to slaughter an animal. So too, when you immerse yourself, there's no mitzvah obligatory. If he wants to go into the Beis Hamikdash, he has to immerse himself. And a mitzvah that is not an obligation, it does not push off a negative commandment. Therefore, the Ridvaz says that the reasoning of the Rambam is like the Kesef Mishnah, that the immersion is only a causation of erasure, but not an actual doing of erasure, and therefore there's no forbiddenness in Torah, and therefore it's permitted for him to immerse.